Hello and welcome to Shill Nation. I'm your host, Ryan Ripley. With me is Chris Spangle, head honcho of the We Are Libertarians network. Hello, Chris.
Hello, how are you doing?
And joining us also is Joe Ruiz, the editor and master chief of the We Are Libertarians blog site.
Great to be with you guys.
Hey, and what we're here to do today is we're launching a new podcast. Chris has been great enough to allow us to expand the We Are Libertarians, brand as we would call it. And we're going to bring you guys Shill Nation. Every week we're going to join one another in the, bashing or pointing out of media experts and on-air talent that is totally shilling the nation.
Hey, let's say critiquing. Let's go
critiquing?
With critiquing. Let's try and have an air of responsibility here, but generally as libertarians we're not going to find most of the media favorable.
That's why you're the head honcho.
Yep.
So what we're going to do, we're going to start off with some some YouTube clips of the Sunday shows where they've gone through and started off with talking about Glenn Greenwald, move on to an interview with Rand Paul that Candy Crowley butchered, and then one more with David Gregory to move, and then we'll move into some online news. Let's give the listeners a little background on us. And Chris, let's start off with you. You are the head honcho of We Are Libertarians, but what else should we know about you?
I was a former business manager of my high school newspaper, the Plainfield Quaker Shaker. So that is part of my journalistic background, and former columnist of the Quaker Shaker as well. So it's a very impressive resume. I'm very highly qualified to critique the media. After college, I went to work for WXNT, a local news radio station here in Indianapolis, and acted as a quasi-reporter and a morning show producer, and have been involved in local politics for about 10 years. And I was the executive director of the Libertarian Party of Indiana after the WXNT job, and now I currently work at the Englehart Group, an ad agency where I work on various accounts dealing with media and politics and small business and all kinds of fun stuff. So, and then we started We Are Libertarians about a year ago, the other podcast that most of the people listening to this first episode will be familiar with, about a year ago, and then we launched the site in January. So it's exciting to start a new podcast. So that is me in a nutshell.
Now, Joe Ruiz, some of you guys might know from his congressional campaign a few years back. But Joe, what else is there to Mr. Ruiz?
Well, in terms of journalism, I started, writing I did a little bit for my high school paper, but then took that into college at Bethel College up here in Mishawaka, and I wrote movie reviews for a short time, where it was a sweet gig. They would just pay me to go see movies, and then I would write what I thought about the movie for the newspaper. So it wasn't entirely difficult. During the congressional run, I actually got quite a bit of media coverage in terms of what people would ordinarily think that a libertarian candidate gets. I know a lot of people in the past have complained about the media ignoring them. I actually got a pretty great response and had quite a few articles, quite a few interviews from various places. During that time, I gained a lot of experience just, answering questions, but also got to take a seat and actually view the media at work. So that was interesting. I began to write editorials, op-eds, and different things, sending them out to newspapers, and got some experience doing that. And now work at News Talk 95.3, Michiana's news channel up here in Mishawaka. That covers the South Bend Elkhart local market. And aside from doing that, I am the managing editor at We Are Libertarians, which basically means that my responsibility is over the guest submissions, editing them, publishing them, making sure they look presentable when we put them out to the public, and then I also write for the site as well.
Oh, that's great, Joe. And I'm Ryan Ripley. I have a mixed media background. Again, just like the two of my co-hosts here, I started at the high school level and progressed on from there. Used to do some writing for SB Nation, one of the larger sports sites on the internet, mainly covering D-League basketball and some of their other NBA teams. really got into the political arena as a candidate back in 2010. Actually ran as a Democrat for a county council seat in a heavily Republican county. And so definitely had to learn very quickly how to navigate the local biased media, and actually scored one of the highest vote counts of a candidate in the district I was running for, and was able to really get the media attention that many candidates complain that they cannot get, so very similar to Joe as well. I contribute to the We Are Libertarians news site, and try to not cause Joe too many editing headaches here and there. But very good, very good.
Sorry, I won't do it again.
No. Very good. But we're gonna parlay this experience into commentary on the mainstream media, and as Chris noted, libertarians, like the three of us, were typically not happy with the mainstream media, but there are just some flagrant examples that we're going to try to pull out and critique, and really just try to reframe the stories and make sure that the right things are being discussed, and that we're not getting lost in the Kardashianization, as Chris and Joe like to say, of the story. So, with that, I wanted to pose a question to you guys, of kind of the overarching story of the show. That's really whether or not, the AP scandal and whether or not the Rosen Fox News scandal has caused the media to change. Do you feel that investigative journalism has been damaged? Do you feel that it's just simply too dangerous for a reporter to ask a difficult question? You guys see that change coming, or is that just is that another offshoot of a non-story?
Go ahead, Chris.
I absolutely think that it's been damaged, and you're already hearing from people that their sources are drying up, that leakers are not wanting to leak, that people are not talking to investigative journalists because they don't know who might be listening. And it's had the exact desired outcome that I think the Obama administration wanted, which is complete security and secrecy for their secrets. And unfortunately, sometimes their secrets run counterintuitive to what our best interests are. And I think that you're going to see a lot of journalists shy away from investigative journalism, which is already desperately needed. The majority of media in this day and age is reporting press releases. The Sunday shows in general act as a mouthpiece for our government. And, we miss people like Tim Russert, who will challenge the power structure. And, you look at investigative journalism today, and it's sorely needed in the mainstream press. There is definitely some great journalists out there who are writing for magazines, for news sites, and that's typically where I end up getting my news is from magazines and news sites, not necessarily from the major news outlets.
What do you think there, Joe?
One of the interesting things that has happened, and I agree with Chris, but I have also seen a growing trend of journalist on journalist crime, whereas I think that journalism at once was kind of a respected institution. Now, and you'll see in one of the clips that we're going to play today, the question of what is a journalist, and it's being redefined at the moment because there are so many people who are information gatherers and so many people who project that information out to the masses, and so some people are beginning to question. And it comes from different groups. Since the NSA leak, you are seeing that there is, what's the right word that I'm looking for? You will see that there is, I guess, this trend growing where you're noticing who is projecting the agenda that they're being told to project, and who is actually putting out honest news. So investigative journalism, yes, it's extremely important, but honest investigation and honest journalism, that's what we really need, and you're not seeing a lot of that. And so those who are dishonest and those who are honest are now in competition. They're now combating one another, and it's interesting to watch that play out in the media also.
One of the points that I think that most people miss is that we're learning just a ridiculous amount of information about our government from a gentleman who is an American citizen, who lives in Brazil, and who writes for a newspaper based out of Britain. and that, aside from the Washington Post, who is still almost apologetic, about their coverage of these NSA scandals and some of the other reporting, aside from the Washington Post, really no other news outlet was really even to scratch the surface of the story. And is that the result of crackdown on leakers, or is that more of the result of just the entertainment shift of the mainstream media? Instead of informing, are we entertaining? Are we just amusing ourselves? And that's a question I ask myself: is, am I watching this to be entertained or informed? And unfortunately, unless, like Chris said, I'm reading an online magazine site like Reason, where I get a lot of my news, I just feel like they're trying to entertain, and they're throwing up those test balloons to see what's going to get the most viewers. And if telling the truth about a story misses, they move over to the dirtier side of a story.
Well, I have a huge problem with things like the George Zimmerman trial, and I got into a almost Twitter fight with one of my journalism heroes, Jake Tapper, yesterday. He was like, "What are you talking about?" Because I tweeted CNN several times and wrote on their Facebook page saying George Zimmerman is not news. That does nothing to affect my life on a daily basis. Paula Deen has no impact on my life at all. The NSA, that does. The immigration debate, that does. And I just, I think I'll repeat this probably every episode, but if you're watching cable news, by and large, you're having your intelligence insulted, because cable news is developed to be infotainment. And should we blame CNN for wanting to run wall-to-wall coverage when that's what gets the ratings? It's us that likes that sort of information. It is not CNN saying this is an important story that we need to push. It's them saying we need to raise some money through advertising because George Zimmerman's going to get great ratings. And that's probably the biggest problem out of anything is we have a business model in major journalism today that is surrounded by ratings and it's so they want to feed us crap, Kardashian and Kanye West and all that kind of stuff.
Maybe it's just that it's hard to intelligently speak about complex issues in 30-second sound bites.
Boy, don't I know it.
And that's really... What's that?
I said, boy, don't I know it.
Well, and I think that's where we've devolved. If you... and not to invoke the the good old days, but if you look at the past, anyone who reads the Lincoln Douglas debates, those two men were debating in a public forum in a public square, and people listened for hours. Now you're pulling teeth to get someone to listen to 30 seconds of how the NSA is completely violating their constitutional rights, and I think that's part of what we should work towards. Exposing and critiquing, and the hope is that eventually we convince others that this is truly happening, and maybe it's just time to prove our point.
I think maybe that's the thing, though. That maybe that's the problem that perpetuates the cycle a little bit, and the reason what Chris is saying, that our intelligence is insulted when we see these stories about like Kim Kardashian, Kanye West, and as much as I love that dessert type news, when that is all that you put yourself in front of. That can become problematic because, yes, it does question your intelligence, but when that becomes the standard that you set yourself to, then the intelligence of society is obviously going to be in decline, and you're no longer going to have those Lincoln Douglas type debates.
Well, I think one of the goals of this show is really to get people to think differently about media. Just as we've done with We're Libertarians, we want people to think differently and view politicians and government in a different way. I think we need to, this show, one of our goals is to get you as a listener to think differently about the media and how you consume it, and what really analyzing what these people are saying. And here at We Are Libertarians, we try to make sure that we have fun. We have a cast of characters that are pretty broad, and it's sometimes quite interesting trying to manage all that. But, we do have a lot of fun doing the show. So it's just we still try to present information that we feel is important in an entertaining way.
So, Chris, let's jump into the first clip. Which, maybe we have some skeptics out there that think that their Fox News or whatever their flavor of news is right and true. Let's give them a taste of what we're talking about, and let's cue up the first clip.
You are a polemicist here. You have a point of view. You are a columnist. You're also a lawyer. You do not dispute that Edward Snowden has broken the law, do you?
No, I think he's very clear about the fact that he did it because his conscience compelled him to do so, just like Daniel Ellsberg did 50 years ago when he released the Pentagon Papers and also admits that he broke the law. I think the question, though, is how can he be charged with espionage? He didn't work for a foreign government. He could have sold this information for millions of dollars and enriched himself. He didn't do any of that either. He stepped forward, and as we want people to do in a democracy, as a government official, learned of wrongdoing and exposed it so we could have a democratic debate about the spying system. Do we really want to put people like that in prison for life when all they're doing is telling us as citizens what our political officials are doing in the dark?
Final question for you, but I'd like you to hang around. I just want to get Pete Williams in here as well. To the extent that you have aided and abetted Snowden, even in his current movements, why shouldn't you, Mr. Greenwald, be charged with a crime?
I think it's pretty extraordinary that anybody who would call themselves a journalist would publicly muse about whether or not other journalists should be charged with felonies. The assumption in your question, David, is completely without evidence, the idea that I've aided and abetted him in any way. The scandal that arose in Washington before our stories began was about the fact that the Obama administration is trying to criminalize investigative journalism by going through the emails and phone records of AP reporters, accusing a Fox News journalist of the theory that you just embraced, being a co-conspirator with felonies for working with sources. If you want to embrace that theory, it means that every investigative journalist in the United States who works with their sources, who receives classified information, is a criminal. And it's precisely those theories and precisely that climate that has become so menacing in the United States. It's why the New Yorker's Jane Mayer said investigative reporting has come to a standstill, her word, as a result of the theories that you just referenced.
Well, the question of who's a journalist may be up to a debate with regard to what you're doing. And, of course, anybody who's watching this understands I was asking a question. That question has been raised by lawmakers as well. I'm not embracing anything, but obviously I take your point.
You see what I'm talking about there? The question, who isn't a journalist, is up for debate in regards to what you're doing.
Exactly. I think Glenn Greenwald articulated it better than anyone, that those who would muse such a charge against journalists for simply doing their job, I mean, that it's got to stand against every ethic and every moral of investigative journalism, and if that's the direction it's going, how are we expected to actually know what is going on within our government and other areas of our lives?
Let me ask you this, because David Gregory at the end of that clip sort of defends himself and says, I'm using the question, I'm not embracing it. I'm simply asking what other lawmakers have said. So, do you feel that David Gregory intended the question because that's what he believes, or do you believe that he is telling the truth at the end of that clip?
I think that David Gregory knows who's watching his show. I think he relies on a wide range of guests that include, Washington insiders, congressmen, even, advisors to the current administration. And that's been a talking point for many of the more irate senators and House reps regarding the Snowden issue. And, I personally think he was, asking a question that was just part of the talking points for the administration and just trying to really see how Greenwald would react.
No, I think that I might agree with you. I guess I'm really hung up on that idea of it, because Lindsey Graham had recently, I think it was him, Spangle, was it him that said or opened the debate on whether or not bloggers were considered journalists.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds like something horrifically anti-constitutional, so it must have come from Lindsey Graham.
Yeah, and then he came back later on and said, of course, I didn't mean that exactly. But it almost sounded as though he wanted to try and regulate people like us who are giving our opinions on modern stories, and anyone who's out there blogging their opinions in regards to, politics and Washington and their antics. And maybe that would even float as far as someone like Glenn Greenwald if they chose to make it as such. So when I see a clip like that, and when I hear a question or when I hear a statement like what I was talking about in regards to redefining or starting a debate on who is a journalist, that kind of freaks me out.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the First Amendment gives the press the freedom to operate, and to start layering on the concepts of criminal activity for doing their operations or for operating as they were supposed to. I just don't see how that's ever going to lead to more freedom, or how that's ever going to lead to more liberty for either all of us viewers or the journalists themselves. And I really think it's just part of the cannibalization process that happens. Right now, Glenn Greenwald is clearly not favored in Washington circles. The entire Congress, the entire U.S. government is furious with Glenn Greenwald, and right now, if you're a journalist who's willing to quote unquote shill for the United States government, and willing to try to detract from what the NSA is doing and make the story about Glenn Greenwald and whether or not he's a criminal, I think there's rewards for those news organizations.
So in this instance, David Gregory, shill or not? Is he a trick or a treat?
Trick or a treat.
Well, and let's explain that. Before the show, I said we ought to have a segment called Trick or Treat. So trick, meaning prostitute, or treat, meaning a gift to libertarians. I would say that David Gregory is as Washington establishment as you can get. I thought he was the absolute worst choice to take over for Tim Russert. I thought, who's the guy who does the Daily Rundown? Chuck Todd would have been he would have been infinitely better for the spot, because he challenges politicians and would have grown into the next Tim Russert. David Gregory is just absolutely the worst.
Well, and that's when these personalities decide they want love me, not respect me, and that's why I got to give him the trick.
I will just plainly say trick. No explanation other than what you guys have said required.
Excellent. So what we have queued up next, let's see how Mika does against Glenn Greenwald as she tries to take him to task, and let's see how he reverses it.
Sophisticated technology. The objective of this is to enable the NSA to monitor every single conversation and every single form of human behavior anywhere in the world. And if that is something that we want our government to be doing, we should have an open debate about that, not have it done in secret.
An incredibly important question that affects all of us. We have to put it in perspective. I want to bring Richard Haas in, but quickly, I just want an answer, yes or no. Isn't it the case that reviewing of emails or any wiretapping cannot take place without an additional warrant from a judge and a review? I mean, it's not like there's haphazard probing into all of our personal emails. Can we put this into context so we understand exactly what's going on?
Yeah, I'll put it into context for you. The White House talking points that you're using are completely misleading and false. The whole point of what the Bush administration did when it disregarded and violated the FISA law, and then when the Congress on a bipartisan basis enacted a new surveillance law in 2008, was to enable the NSA to read emails between people in the United States and people outside of the United States without having first to go to a FISA court and get a warrant. The only time individual warrants are needed is when two people are both inside the United States and are both American citizens. But under that law, the U.S. government and the NSA have the power and exercise the power to listen in on telephone conversations and read emails involving all kinds of American citizens. And the Senate has been repeatedly asking for the numbers of how many Americans they're doing that to, and the NSA keeps saying, and it's false, they can't provide those numbers. So those talking points that you're reading from are completely false, as anybody who's paid even remote attention to the surveillance debates know over the last 10 years.
Glenn, I'd like to ask a question. Is this legal or illegal? Or Richard Haas, can you help me out here since Glenn doesn't want to answer the question? Is the law being broken here?
I did answer your question.
I question the law. I question all the issues that this raises. I'm personally concerned as well, but I'd like to put this in perspective.
That whole clip is just excellent. And if you want to watch the whole interviews in entirety, we're playing clips. We've got a playlist on the We Are Libertarians YouTube page for the videos that we're playing today. Glenn Greenwald that's so excellent.
Yeah, Joe Scarborough, that was from the Morning Joe, and typically he'll ask a decent question or two, but Mika jumps in here and tries to put Glenn Greenwald on the spot, and he just Chris, to steal your phrase, I mean, that's boom roasted. That is there's no other way to put it. She tried to basically spout out the White House talking points, and he just called her out on it first of all, and then just took her straight down that in fact the scope and the powers and the abilities of the NSA are far greater than anything that the administration would want us to believe.
Not only did she try to spout out White House talking points, it looked as though she were reading verbatim, as if Jay Carney sent out some sort of email to everyone within the mainstream media, and she just printed off that email and brought it to her desk during Morning Joe and was reading Jay Carney's words verbatim. That's what it looked like, and it was as if Glenn Greenwald could see her, and she kept looking down at her notes, and she's like, let me ask you a question, and then she tried to pass those words along as though they were her own. And so I would speculate that maybe those were exactly White House talking points, and I'm so glad to see him call her out on that, and you see how defensive she became.
Well, and it's important for people to realize that these things do happen, that it may not be Jay Carney shooting the email out, but certainly someone in his staff is contacting or in contact with, friendly media outlets and friendly media personalities, and that these things are disseminated out. So it's important to realize that the media is manipulated by the talking points that and the narratives that the White House and other pieces of Congress and others that they want you to hear.
Yeah, and understand that I'm not saying that it was absolutely Jay Carney, but he's obviously the face of the press in terms of the White House. And so somebody close to them, it seems like, where did those words come from? What is she reading off of? It's just, I don't know, it's just speculation on my part, I guess.
This is all speculation. But
not necessarily speculation. I mean, we don't know what her actions are directly, but one of the things that have helped solidify Republicans and Democrats and making sure that they maintain in power, the left and the right, they each morning there are certain groups. There is on the right, for instance, the Heritage Foundation, the various groups like the one that what's the pledge guy, Grover Norquist. A lot of those kind of people, plus government officials or staffers, all get on a conference call to go over the day's plans, and the left does it too with the Center of American Progress, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and they get together and they sort of, and it's not a joke, this is actually, you can look it up.
No, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, you mentioned her name, that just made me laugh.
Okay. I like that a person's name is a joke.
Oh, yeah.
It is.
It's associated memory, man. I just know what she's about.
Affairs.
So, gentlemen, at the risk of thousands upon thousands of hate mails over labeling Mika a trick or a treat, what do we think about this clip? Is it trick, treat, little of both? Joe Ruiz, you're on the spot.
Oh, I would absolutely say trick. And almost every time that I've seen Mika doing anything, that's the conclusion that I would draw, even in the recent viral Russell Brand interview.
I say treat because we've got Glenn Greenwald, and here's a guy who started out as a constitutional lawyer, a litigator, started a blog, then his blog got some heat, so he got picked up by Salon to write for issues, then Guardian hired him away to be a blogger and a journalist, and he's out there telling truth, so he is definitely a treat.
So you're rating Greenwald and not Mika?
Yeah, because Mika doesn't deserve to be rated.
I got to go with Spangle on this one, Joe. I got to say that I'm not even going to give her the credentials of a journalist. I'm not going to label her. I'm going to reiterate my boom roasted. Totally happy to see that, and I'm going to say it was a treat to get to listen to Glenn Greenwald completely destroy those talking points.
So how about Joe Scarborough? Is he just neutral kind of in this clip?
He's kind of a bystander. if you watch enough Morning Joe, I think you realize that I think he wants to ask good questions, and sometimes he'll actually pull it off. But I think we could find a mix on Joe. I'm going to go neutral.
And who is the shill who is... I absolutely think that the only one who's actually broken the law here is Mr. Snowden.
It's some retired somebody who is an expert and we got a government paycheck, has a government pension, so do the math.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and say trick for him as well.
There you go. A former muckety muck that's just protecting the money. So up next we have another Glenn Greenwald takedown. This one a little shorter, but definitely pretty sweet.
Yeah, and this clip is Norah O'Donnell on the Today Show talking to Glenn Greenwald.
Glenn, in the video, as we just saw, Snowden makes what I consider to be a rather remarkable claim, stating, quote, I, sitting at my desk, certainly had the authorities to wiretap you, your accountant, a federal judge, even the president if I had a personal email. Let's make a distinction here. He didn't say that he had the ability to do it. For example, if he went rogue, he said he had the legal authority to do it. Did you follow up and ask him what legal authority that purports to be?
That isn't what he said. He didn't say he had the legal authority. That's a word that you included in the statement that he didn't actually include. What he meant clearly was that given... Yeah, he said authority, not legal authority, which is what you just quoted him as saying. And what I'm telling you is that is a misquotation, because what he was clearly saying was that, and the point that you ought to be interested in as a journalist, more so than the one that you asked, is that people who sit at the NSA desk, thousands of them, have the authority, meaning the NSA has given them the power to be able to go in and scrutinize the communications of any American. It may not be legal, but they have the power to do it. If this is really legal, why doesn't the government allow federal courts to rule on whether or not our constitutional rights are being violated as citizens? It's because they do everything in secret, which is why we need whistleblowers to come forth like Mr. Snowden so that we can have some transparency on political officials.
Fair enough. The government comes in, makes the argument that this is protected by the state secrets privilege. Then a federal judge rules on that. And in this case, a federal judge has said that the state secrets privilege was asserted properly. That is within the law, is it not?
Right. Actually, that's not at all what happened. What happened was the ACLU went into court and asked for a ruling on the constitutionality of the law. And what the federal government said is you have no ability to prove that your clients were actually eavesdropped on. You can't prove they were subjected to surveillance because everyone that we surveil, we keep that a secret. And therefore, your clients have no standing to sue. As journalists, I think our number one obligation should be not to allow government officials to scream terrorists and try and scare people every time there's transparency brought to them, but instead scrutinize whether those claims are valid.
So, guys, I think it's fair to say she never had a shot during that entire clip.
You compare Norah O'Donnell next to Glenn Greenwald, and he keeps referring to her as a journalist, and I don't know, in my mind there's just something different about Glenn Greenwald, who has credentials as a lawyer, who takes the time to study the law and apply the law to these complex cases, has a lot of top-secret informants. And then there's Norah O'Donnell, who probably rose through the ranks of TV news because of her looks, and that's not just because she's a female. That happens with males, too. Trust me, there are plenty of dumb, pretty males in TV news. You know, the extent of her journalist reporting probably came at NBC. Like, they're not even in the same league. Like, I just think it's so cute that he calls her a journalist.
Yeah, it does seem like that he might have been taking a little bit easy on her. She never was in it with him, just not even in the same ballpark, and it shows. And really just the way that she's trying to insert words into quotes and trying to spin the narrative back to the White House talking points or just to the overall administration talking points. It was just so transparent that I think even I would imagine that Mr. Greenwald was even a little bit amused while trying to answer that in at least a semi-civil way.
What a way to catapult yourself into the public eye. I mean, it's almost as if the NSA leak and the Edward Snowden controversy were just like a what do you call it? Drawing a blank on the word, but
Catalyst?
Just, I guess, a media stunt in order to boost sales and response for Glenn Greenwald's Greenwald Schools Your Media Anchor Tour or something like that, because he certainly did.
Well, back to Norah O'Donnell. She's a very good reader. and that is an admirable quality. You know, that's the problem with a lot of the generic news anchors and anchorettes across television news. They're very good readers, and they have, you know, they don't prepare the news. Someone like Glenn Greenwald goes out and finds the news, reports it, prepares it, breaks it down, and then reports it. And someone who sits at an anchor desk like that doesn't necessarily have to do that. And that's not a value judgment of right or wrong. It's just the way it is. So, you become in that position a mile wide and an inch deep.
So, guys, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to say that since she never really had a shot, I'm going to call it a pure treat. I think she served up a softball to Glenn Greenwald and really just, I'm going to go pure treat. We're going to be nice on this one because she really was just totally out of her league.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah, Spangle, that was fine in the days when news was kind of written as fact and not something with bias and opinion before the 24-hour networks, when it was just, like in Central Park today, there was a robbery, and you know what I mean? Like, it just told the story as it was. And so now, in the age where somebody's obviously writing this with bias, to give that to a person who's supposed to be considered by the public to be a journalist, and to just read it as is and not, effectively demonstrate that they understand the situation. Man, that's awful. And so, yeah, but I would agree with you. This is a treat.
I would generally argue that there is bias, okay? There is always going to be bias. And a lot of them probably do have a progressive bias, but I am not the type of person. I've been around enough journalists long enough to know that the majority of them, and I've had this happen in my own life, when I was at the radio station and I was covering Republicans and Democrats, it made me a libertarian because I saw how stupid and broken the inside of the two parties were and how stupid and broken government was, that I lost faith in either side. And I think the majority of journalists don't have a liberal or a conservative bias unless they're a columnist. I'd say most of them are libertarian or independent or so sick of it all that they just can't take it anymore. I don't think that people like Rush Limbaugh are right when they say everything's a liberal conspiracy. Richard Murdoch is a victim of media bias. It's like, no, maybe on some small level, but at the end of the day, it makes a good story that you've got someone running for Senate saying something stupid. And they don't often have guests on like Glenn Greenwald who will confront them and challenge them.
Yeah, and it's dangerous for certain members of the media to actually have intelligent people on the air, and this past clip is just a pure Schadenfreude moment for that kind of interaction. Up next, what we have here is my favorite shill. I would call her the queen of the media shills, and that's Candy Crowley. And this clip is her with Senator Rand Paul, where she tries to, I guess, inject talking points, but as most would expect, Senator Rand Paul is having nothing to do with it.
Has just landed. I want to move on now, thanks, Phil, to Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. He is joining me from Bowling Green. Senator, what do you make of this flight? What do you make of the fact that Russia is allowing him in and that Hong Kong let him go? What does that tell us?
I'm not sure what it tells us, but I think it's still going to be an open question how this young man's judged. I do think that when history looks at this, they're going to contrast the behavior of James Clapper, our National Intelligence Director, with Edward Snowden. Mr. Clapper lied in Congress in defiance of the law in the name of security. Mr. Snowden told the truth in the name of privacy. So I think there will be a judgment because both of them broke the law, and history will have to determine. I do think for Mr. Snowden, if he cozies up to the Russian government, it'll be nothing but bad for his name in history. If he goes to an independent third country like Iceland, and if he refuses to talk to any sort of formal government about this, I think there's a chance that he'll be seen as an advocate of privacy. If he cozies up to either the Russian government, the Chinese government, or any of these governments that are perceived still as enemies of ours, I think that that'll be a real problem for him in history.
So you are sympathetic to Edward Snowden. I wonder if you heard Senator Schumer say earlier, this guy is no hero here. He is not, some Martin Luther King telling the truth, civil rights kind of guy. That he, in fact, whether you like it or not, there are laws there, and he released information that he was not supposed to release. So,
say it again, Candy. Say it again. That's that she may as well be again the mouthpiece or the fact checker for Obama. That's clearly quoting Schumer. I don't know, Chris.
I have to disagree. I like Candy. I think Candy, here's the thing. This is what they all do. John Stossel does this too. I was watching Stossel before this, and if you're a libertarian that doesn't watch John Stossel, you're crazy. You can get it for free on Hulu.com. What Stossel does is he has his point of view. It's a definite point of view, and he doesn't give his point of view during the show. He poses a question sarcastically to his guests. It's a very, so Justin Amash, why should I care that the NSA spies on me? I've got nothing to hide, and that's generally what I think they do on these Sunday shows and in the media is they have various guests on and various experts on to pose the conventional wisdom question to get their point of view. So, to say that Candy is in the bag for Obama may be a tad bit harsh. That's because, there are very few people that I have sort of a tiny shred of respect for in TV news, and most of them are on CNN. So,
hey, I like Candy too. Sour Patch Kids.
Stop it!
Taffy.
Boo!
Hey, you started it. You said Candy is in the bag for Obama.
He said.
I mean, there's your fun, buddy. Regardless, Candy Crowley is not one of the candy confectionaries that I would consider awesome. And in this instance, I would say she is definitely trick rather than treat. But kudos to Rand Paul, who always keeps, and it even sounded like he was contracting a little bit of a cold or something in this interview, but he's always so level-headed, and he always comes across to me as rational and reasonable. And I think that's something you want in a leader, especially in the liberty movement, as we're trying to grow awareness for the things that we believe in.
Do you think we like Rand and Glenn because they sort of had that "I don't give an S about you, so F yourself" kind of attitude when they go in these shows?
That is the swagger, isn't it? He does have that Midwestern, I am who I am, and I F you and F off if you're not happy with what I'm saying.
That's a Midwestern trait? I really thought that was more like
Glenn
Jersey.
a little bit more than Rand, but I think Rand always comes across as very casual. Like he's obviously very convicted. He believes in the things that he believes in, I think, but he plays it chill, and I don't think that he puts it as in your face as maybe his dad did.
I'm coming on your show, and clearly I feel like you're an idiot, and but I'm thankful that you're having me on.
Let's see.
So let's say that.
Let's listen to how Rand responded to the legality question.
He shouldn't be prosecuted. What do you think?
No, I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that Martin Luther King was kept in jail and accused for 30 days. I think he was never threatened with life in prison, and so the penalties are disproportionate to it, so I think you can't quite compare them. But I would say that Mr. Snowden hasn't lied to anyone. He did break his oath of office, but part of his oath of office is to the Constitution, and he believes that when James Clapper came in March, our National Director of Intelligence came and lied, that he was simply coming forward and telling the truth, that your government was lying. And this is a big concern of mine because it makes me doubt the administration and their word to us when they come and talk to us, because they have now admitted that they will lie to us if they think it's in the name of national security.
I believe that the Director Clapper has said that when he said the U.S. didn't spy on Americans or gather information wittingly, that he was talking about the PRISM program. But I want to move you on.
No, he admitted that he lied, and he said he was saying the least of untruthful things. So he did admit that he lied.
Okay,
Spangle, you got some splaining to do on that.
Lucy?
It really it does raise a question in my mind. Why has there not been more focus on Clapper? I guess it's because we've been so focused on Snowden and where is he and what is he doing, and you know, turning him into a cartoon caricature figure type, you know, where it's the terminal and he's running around like Tom Hanks in the Moscow airport. But, you know...
Now, if he starts doing some masonry, that will be a news story, Chris.
But the head of the National Security Agency lied under oath to Congress, and nobody is saying a thing about it. It is not even... It's barely even news. It's barely even mentioned in the blogosphere.
That even more surprising, I believe, 28 senators just sent a letter to Mr. Clapper demanding answers, demanding to know why he lied under oath, why certain pieces of information haven't been delivered. I have not seen that anywhere in the mainstream media. And for 28 senators, I believe, to step up and say, we believe there's something wrong here, and we're going to put it in writing and sign this and send it to you. That is significant, especially when dealing with the intelligence director for our country.
Spangle, explain a little bit about Clapper, if you could, because what you're saying is that people are hearing an awful lot about Snowden. That seems to be the direction that the Shill Nation is taking it. So for those who aren't hearing that name as much, explain.
I think it's James. James Clapper is the head of the National Security Agency. And he was in front of Congress, 2 months ago, I think, and Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon, right? Not getting all my facts right here. I don't know, but still, it stands. Clapper was talking to Wyden, who is excellent on civil liberties, and Wyden and Mark Udall from Colorado have come out and said repeatedly, the American people, when they find out what we have found out about these certain programs, are going to be pretty angry, but they've been sworn to secrecy and have given an oath to protect the nation's secrets, although they're not upholding their oath completely to protect the United States Constitution. And this was essentially, in my view, Wyden giving Clapper an opportunity to come clean about the PRISM program and about the domestic spying. And, Wyden didn't want to do it because he didn't want to get charged with the Espionage Act. So he was giving the NSA director a chance to level with the American people about what our government is doing. And he asked if they are listening into Americans' phone calls or if they're collecting the data of all Americans. And Clapper said no. Both of those are a complete fabrication. It's an absolute, flat-out lie under oath, and he should be prosecuted for perjury. But instead, nothing's happening to him at all. And he came out and said after that, well, that was the least truthful thing that I could say. What he should have said was, for national security, I can't say anything. But instead, he lied. So
exactly,
throw him in prison for perjury.
Right, and it's really the arrogance, I think, that comes through that, no one saw Edward Snowden coming. I mean, no one realized that, whether he walked out of the door with 4 laptops or a thumb drive or however he transported his data. I don't think that anyone in the intelligence community, anyone in Congress saw this kind of leak coming, and I think there's just an arrogance there that we can respond to Congress however we wish. They're not going to know it anyways, and that really should be a critical part of the narrative for this whole Edward Snowden story, and it just has gotten lost in the mix that Mr. Clapper completely got called out, and it's just been brushed under the rug.
And
now, is that who Rand Paul was talking about in the clip there when he was talking about someone violating their oath of office and part of that oath being to the Constitution?
No, I think Senator Paul was talking about how Edward Snowden did take an oath of office, or he signed a promise or a pledge to keep information classified and secret. And so I think, Rand Paul
was to the Constitution.
That part was where Rand Paul was explaining that he felt that his obligation to the Constitution outweighed his oath.
Right. Yeah. Well, I just think it's interesting. I mean, obviously that there's going to be some secrecy in terms of the NSA. Confidentiality is probably a better word than secrecy to use. But yeah, we elect officials who take an oath of office, and oftentimes they go out and do things that are less than constitutional, and they break that oath, and that should be a bigger deal to us than some guy who's been hired freelance by one of these organizations, is not elected to the people, is not responsible to the people in the same way that elected officials are, and yet we're holding him to this standard and trying him almost trying to try him as though he were a criminal, where we don't do that to any of these people who we elect, and we give this obligation to.
Clapper, to me, has significantly eroded my trust in anything that any government official says. I mean, I already am at a point where when Jay Carney opens his mouth, I know to believe the opposite. I mean, the guy... Right, and Clapper just... I don't understand how the majority of the media can take Clapper at his word, or Keith Alexander, General Keith Alexander, who is head of our national security for Obama. How can we take the power structure seriously and give them that as if they're the default truth? That is one thing that has blown my mind throughout the entire NSA scandal, is that the majority of the talking heads and the media and journalists have just defaulted on, well, this is what the government says, so we've got to try and prove them right. And that's a huge distinction between this is what the government says and we need to prove them wrong. And Glenn Greenwald is trying to prove people wrong, whereas the people that he's brushing up against are trying to prove the government right. And that's a huge, huge problem for the American Republic.
Well, and not only are they trying to prove the government right, they're also trying to slime Glenn Greenwald in the process. And so not only do they try to prove themselves correct, but they're also trying to say that not only is Glenn Greenwald wrong, he's also a slimeball. And that's the direction the current narrative has gone.
We got about 5 to 10 more minutes.
All right, so let's move into the Mike Rogers piece. I think we got the feel for how Rand Paul was dealing with Candy Crowley. I don't know, Chris, trick or treat on Candy?
Oh, Candy's always a delight. No. I think there are some of these shows that are more tolerable than others. I think, Fox News Sunday has one of the more tolerable shows. I like George Stephanopoulos. Doesn't mean that I believe them. It's just they're far better than Meet the Press.
You really think she's a delight?
No, of course not.
Okay,
I'm a libertarian.
I think
I'm a libertarian,
like a vile
Joe.
and distasteful woman.
I must hate everyone. No, I think Candy Crowley, to me, has a certain level of gravitas that I think, I don't know why, but I respect her more than I respect people like David Gregory and some of the other people that are on television. So I don't know why I like her. I just do.
Okay.
Doesn't mean she's not.
Joe, what do you think? Are you going trick or treat on this one?
Oh, it's trick with capital letters all the way across.
Candy, is it? Okay. I have to go with Joe on this one, Chris. I can't share in your respect for Candy Crowley. I just don't see it.
I'm not saying that she's not a shill who is trying to prove the government right. I'm saying
backpedal.
I'm saying that she
Chris is shilling on behalf of the
Shill Nation has just shilled.
I'm saying she is watchable. So
I will admit she does bring a level of intelligence that a David Gregory, who is really a tan with a hairpiece, really does not bring to any kind of show. And Candy does do that.
That is exactly what I'm saying. People like Tapper, Stephanopoulos, Aaron Burnett, these people, Anderson Cooper, they're legitimate journalists who are legitimately reporting the news. It's just that they're asking the questions that the government wants them to ask a lot of the times. But even then, hey, look at Tapper yesterday putting out the next Obama scandal on Charles Edwards, the Inspector General for Department of Homeland Security, succumbing to political pressure to fudge the prostitution Secret Service scandal. So, I mean, that's a very good piece of investigative journalism. So
let's move on to the next clip. This is one, guys, that I think has completely slipped by most sources. I haven't seen this really talked about much, but this is Congressman Mike Rogers on Meet the Press discussing just the severity of what Mr. Snowden has done and how this has damaged the nation. And he used a phrase that I want us to key in on, and we'll hit on it right after the clip.
What lengths should this administration go to track Snowden down? The diplomatic route, as Pete Williams reported on, could be very difficult if he ends up in Venezuela. You're chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. What should this administration do?
They should use every legal avenue we have to bring him back to the United States. And listen, if he believes that he's doing something good, and by the way, he went outside all of the whistleblower avenues that were available to anyone in this government, including people who have classified information. We get 2 or 3 visits from whistleblowers every single week in the committee, and we investigate everyone thoroughly. He didn't choose that route. If he really believes he did something good, he should get on a plane, come back, and face the consequences of his actions.
Is he gone? Do you think he's gone? Not to return?
I'm not sure I would say gone forever. I do think that we'll continue with extradition activities wherever he ends up, and we should continue to find ways to return him to the United States and get the United States public's information back.
Let me guess and
so there's the
let me guess if I can pick up on what you were interested in. Let me play a little game here, because something caught my attention too. Was it the fact that they have 2 to 3 whistleblowers a week come to them?
Yes.
Exactly. And how many do we actually hear about?
Mm-hmm.
Well, just what I cited before we played the clip, Tapper had a couple whistleblowers come to Ron Johnson, and I don't think it was Murkowski. I think it was the other senator, and that's how they found out about this inspector general screwing around. And so that was brought up by a whistleblower. I think when you look at Ron Wyden, who clearly wanted to say something about this program but could not, he's a United States senator. He's in the establishment structure higher than a whistleblower, and he couldn't say a word. So how can we expect that this kid is going to get anywhere?
Yeah, I mean, and that's really that's the moment where David Gregory could drop the shill status and just dig into that and say, well, what do you mean, three whistleblowers a week? And that just rolled on by. That comment didn't go anywhere.
I think it's kind of a ridiculous notion that we have government channels for whistleblowers, so that a whistleblower can come in to government organizations or officials and say, hey, I've got evidence or I've got the word that the government is doing something irresponsible or is violating their constitutional oath or is just whatever negative on behalf of the people. And the government's going to be like, oh, you figured us out? Yeah, we'll put that out. We'll let the people know about it. Like, that's ridiculous. They're not going to tattletale on themselves. And that's why Edward Snowden had to take the route that he took.
Well, and there's one other piece of that clip that I'd like to zero in on real quick, and that's the people's data. And so at the end of that clip, Congressman Mike Rogers said that he referenced getting the people's data back from Edward Snowden. And my question again would be, if I'm in David Gregory's seat, is if it's the people's data, why is it top secret? Why is it classified? Why does it have to be stolen? If it's their property, why do they have to find out about what their government's doing from a whistleblower and via foreign press?
And does he mean, and Mike Rogers is head of the House Foreign Intelligence Committee, by the way, if we didn't say that already, is his attitude, and I would follow up with this, is your attitude that the people's data, I mean, that this belongs to the United States government, everyone's personal information that they're depositing onto third-party servers? I mean, clarify that a little bit.
Absolutely. There's definitely a posture or a...
Yeah, I own my own data? Do I own my own property? Am I own my own person? And are my papers secure? Or do they belong to the government? Because then we've got a real problem.
The answer today is no, Chris. The answer is no.
Right.
I think given the revelations of the Guardian and the Washington Post, via Edward Snowden and Glenn Greenwald, the answer has to be no. And this was a beautiful opportunity for David Gregory to jump in and say, well, to ask exactly your questions. What do these terms mean? Are we secure in our persons and in our stuff, our property? And the moment just blew on by.
No, the whole conversation for the last 2 weeks should not be, is Edward Snowden a hero or not? The question to these politicians from these Sunday show hosts should be, justify to me, I'm speaking on behalf of the American people, justify to me why I lose my right to privacy when I deposit my information on a third-party server. Because the government's attitude is that your papers, as referenced in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the Fourth Amendment, are not secure if you give that data over to a third-party provider like a cell phone provider or Facebook or Google. Well, that means that everything in the future is no longer private. It's all public information. So your health records, as they digitize those are public record. They're on a third-party server. This is the future, and this is an enormous battle between the United States government and the American people. Who owns my papers? Who owns my property if it's held on a third-party service? And that should be the question. But instead, the question is, let's talk about Edward Snowden. Should he be hung for leaking information that everybody already knew and saying that U.S. spy agencies spy on other countries? Oh, wow.
Or even Edward Snowden's girlfriend, hot or not.
Right.
Those are the headlines that we're getting right now.
Yeah,
instead of
so terrible.
Instead of, is the Constitution still in effect? Well, then let's wrap it up. We'll save our listeners some time. And I think, guys, the initial question we asked, has the AP and the Fox News scandals, has that impacted journalism? I think what we're seeing just from these 5 interactions we went through is that it's a definite yes. The Shill factor is certainly in overdrive. And it's becoming, I think, difficult to ask the questions that need to be asked, just as we just discussed on the Mike Rogers clip. And unfortunately, that's going to continue. And that's what I think that's our role in this podcast. We need to continue to point these instances out. We need to continue to show the people exactly how their news is manipulated and try to help them not only see this point, but to also lead them to perhaps the ability to find better news sources and to do their own research. What do you guys think about that?
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. And if we didn't summarize it enough, say Mike Rogers in this instance, trick.
Definitely trick.
Completely. He's not even the prostitute. He's the prostitute and the John.
Well, and I think he also has some pimp qualities there, since he's sitting on the oversight committee that's largely responsible for failing to protect us from these violations that we're finding out about. So,
once again, the We Are Libertarians network has taken a serious subject and made it incredibly classy.
Well, and with that, we'd like to thank the listeners for sticking around with us on this inaugural episode of Shill Nation. We'd also like to tell you guys that we need your help. That throughout the news cycle, we can't watch everything everywhere, and we'd love for you to participate as well. So here's what we'd like for you to do. We need you to follow We Are Libertarians on Twitter or on Facebook and start sending in the news pieces that you feel are shill-worthy, that we should be tearing apart and criticizing and critiquing and trying to expose the shill factor. So use the Twitter hashtag ShillNation and send those tweets into the We Are Libertarians Twitter account or the Facebook page, which can be found on the wearelibertarians.com website. If you'd like an alternative perspective on news and some of the views especially from a libertarity tilt, please do check out the wearelibertarians.com website, as Joe and I do post regularly some comments along with the other contributors and the fabulous writers that work on that site. So with that said, gentlemen, I think we knocked out a good first Shill Nation. Thank you guys for being on, and can't wait to hear the clips for next week.
All right. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.